We'll just go through the emergency procedures on the screen. Please take a note of them. As you can see, if you can make sure your phone is switched to silent mode. And just a reminder for members to use their microphones so those online are able to hear us. We'll move through to our opening karakia. Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatakatahau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tata ki tai, e hiaki ana te atakura, he tio, hei huka, hei hauhu, ti hei moriora. Thank you. Moving through to apologies. I just note that Councillor Briggs will need to leave at 12:30, so noting that. And we also have Councillor Dyer, who is attending via Zoom. And we also have apologies for lateness for Councillor Brown. So I'll move those apologies. So I have seconded by Councillor Stallinger. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. Declare that carried. Okay, we'll now move through to public comment, and we just have Kaz Young speaking on behalf of the Community Board, or just yourself? Community Board, great, awesome. So speaking to the paid parking item, over to you, Kaz.
Morena koutou. All good, this wasn't me. Yes, so I'm speaking on behalf of the Petone Community Board as of like 3 minutes ago, but we obviously are here to talk about the paid parking situation yet again. It has become quite a big topic for us in our area, and bear with me as my thoughts are not completely clear on this as such, but I guess for us we're very mindful of the continued impacts on our businesses down that street in particular, and useful to be able to see this information, so we're very grateful for officers for providing this in terms of just understanding a bit more about what is happening there, but we are still against seeing that change. We believe that we don't have a data set that's actually really clear around what's been happening there. And we're also hearing that pressure from businesses who are really struggling still, some who have really seen a deep impact on that, and just recognising also that, which point was it? Sorry. And also just recognising that some of those machines around that cashless dynamic as well, just wanting to raise a bit of a concern or a flag, perhaps a consideration around the impact of that as well, that it has on the community. We are hearing of those that are already feeling a bit challenged around cashless machines and feeling a bit daunted by those. And so I guess, that's a bit of a consideration for officers to think about how else that might play out, because we're already hearing reports for some people who do find that really challenging and difficult. And I think we hate to see them all going to cashless, so just something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaz. Any questions from members? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just in terms of the options that are explored in the paper here, which include no increase in parking rates across the city or in Petone, through to 1 hour free either across the city or in Petone, does the Community Board have a preference based on the options in front of us today?
So we haven't had a deep conversation as such on this as a whole board. I think personally I would like to see it remain in Petone just because we don't have the data set. I would speak to the data set if I had seen it for everywhere else, but that's not something I feel like I can comment on. But I think in terms of understanding that so far we haven't met those targets in the last few months, in Petone in particular, and we're already seeing some of the struggles and hearing even deeper struggles that go beyond this data set and figures. I'm really loath to see that change because I actually think there could be a negative impact if you increase it further.
So just for clarity, your preference is no increase in parking rates, particularly in Petone?
Correct.
Any other questions? No, thank you very much, Kaz. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Okay, just before we move through to item 4, which is the presentation from Wellington Water, I did just want to acknowledge 2 of the recipients in the King's Birthday Honours from the weekend. I know that there are a number of people from Lower Hutt, but there were 2 in particular which stood out, which I just wanted to mention here, and then we will acknowledge all of them at a proper full council meeting in the mayoral statement. So first off, I just wanted to acknowledge Dr. Alicia Moyahu, who has been made a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to Māori culture. Alicia will be well known to everyone around the table for her support of the council, and obviously her involvement and contribution as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge Alicia, and we'll do that properly a little bit later on. But also, and in particular, I wanted to acknowledge former councillor Margaret Cousins, who has been awarded a King's Service Medal for services to local government and the community. Those of you will also know Margaret was a Hutt City Councillor representing the Western Ward from 1983 through to 2019. Again, we'll make sure we do that properly in due course, but I want to mention those two particular acknowledgements. Okay, moving through to item 4. So we'll welcome up Pat Doherty and Nick Leggett, who are going to present. We've also got Charles Parker to present the Value for Money report back. Thanks. So over to you, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kia ora tātou, councillors and officers. We're here again today, unfortunately, to talk to you about the budgetary failure and the ramifications from that, and the reports that Wellington Water has commissioned into Value for Money, and also the internal systems and processes and controls within the organisation. And so I do apologise to Hutt City Council for the poor performance of Wellington Water in many areas of our business, and recognise that effectively we're your water department, and you should be able to have trust in us, and you have put trust in us over many years, and that's reflected in the per capita spend that is the highest in the region, has been for a long time. Actually, I think in pure numerical terms, it's often been the highest in the region. So we recognise that Hutt City has made water a priority, and that Wellington Water was a trusted Wellington Water is your ability to be able to deliver for your residents on that priority, and we've fallen short. And so I think it's important to put that on the table up front. But we've also got to look today at what have we done to improve the situation within the company, to be able to give you and your residents assurance that things are better, and that most importantly, we're able to communicate to you that we are getting better value for your dollar in everything that we spend on your behalf. We've also got to show that the organisation has systems that can be transferred, and ways of working that can be transferred to a new water entity. And so a big part of our job is to work pretty furiously to ensure that our operations and our processes meet the standard that you would expect, that will allow a new water entity for the region to be effective from day one. The board has sought to fully uncover the issues that we have believed were there from the moment we've been aware of them. And this started, and I mentioned before the budgetary issue, this started with that budgetary issue that we've talked to you about before in May last year. That failure to include the capital charge to you as councils in your long-term plan was a very obvious failure, and it's one that's led to us uncovering a number of other failures and areas of poor performance. I've said a number of times it's a bit like peeling an onion. We continue to find issues, but actually we also continue to improve practices, and I think Pat will talk to you a little about that. But we've obviously looked at reports we've got from the AECOM report. It gave us a really clear steer that the difference between the cost of doing work in the water area in comparison to other regions and other cities, and obviously we have been more expensive. But I do want to correct the misunderstanding that's really taken hold in the headlines, which was that we're 3 times more expensive. It wasn't a per unit comparison. We're going back to jobs 3 times as much. We know why that is. We've got an age network that hasn't had the renewals and the investment over many decades that it should have. And I think that that's pretty well understood by people. And of course, the costs of reactive maintenance. And you know, as well as I do, the additional money that you have put into leaks. Now, we can all feel the improvement there. That's a job well done, but they are only a patch job, and that's because the underlying network is old, and it needs replacement and reinvestment at a level that within our current scenarios we can't afford. And of course that drives the whole debate and discussion towards the new water entity. So it isn't, you know, Wellington's also got some special characteristics, which once again, you know as well, if not better than I do. Our geography, cost of roading is higher, particularly in Wellington City, but actually Hutt City is higher than average. So every time you cut into a road, the cost of that job is obviously higher. And we know that that if we're going to do proper comparisons and to benchmark correctly, that's an expectation of yourselves as councils, and that we need to do that. And then there's the diagnosis of the problem, which I think we've all gone through, and we know it's necessary. But it's then what are we doing in terms of tangible improvements that can help give you the satisfaction that value is evident in the work that's done on your behalf. And that is about introducing competitive tension into the relationships that Wellington Water has with its external contractors and consultants, ensuring that they keep a sharp pencil moving forward, but ensuring as well that we've got an open and fair marketplace that where competition gives us, you know, that value for money assurance and the pricing that we're achieving. And it's also Wellington Water having the internal systems and people having the right attitude and have confidence in their ways of working to ensure that they're standing over the work that's being done and ensuring that, once again, the work's being completed properly and that we're getting good value for money. So there's a lot in there. And I think from the start, when Wellington Water was established, it was about getting the job done. It was about concern that the consultant and contractor market, is it big enough to sustain the pipeline of work that the water company has got? And crikey, we've got these people, they're doing good work for us. We've got to keep them close. That was right. That was the right way to start off Wellington Water's life, but it didn't mature. That as the organisation grew, and it grew substantially, you know, it went from $60 million a year of capital projects 7 years ago to $350 million last year, right? But it didn't have the systems that you would expect in an organisation because that investment was never made. So we became very reliant on people to do the job, but actually also to be able to use their systems and their people to help us achieve what we needed to do. And so it's a gradual unpacking of the issues and a really swift change that was required, and actually Pat and Charles on the team have been driving to some success. And I might stop there and let Pat talk about the detail. I could actually talk quite a bit, but I kind of think it's the Chief Executive's job to do that. But I want to give you the assurance, lastly, that, you know, you've given us 3 new directors. We've now got a board of 7. We've got some other skill sets there. You know, to give you some assurance, the board that was, it had 4 people, very strong financial and commercial skills on board. Part of the cultural change organisation is actually having the right information flow to the board. That was a big gap. And you know, from the changes that we've made, we've taken that very seriously. And and a different culture exists now. Nothing's perfect. We don't always get exactly what we want, but we've got a sense of problems, small problems before they become big problems, the big exposures and risks of, that the organisation faces. If you think about health and safety, if you think about really big projects that may be overspent or may not be delivered on time, and then those internal systems and controls, those challenges, those basic things that you would expect to be there, are now being built. Pretty retrospectively, but nonetheless, they're being built. So if you've got any questions for me, I'm really happy to take them. Otherwise, I'll hand over to Pat and we can have questions after he's spoken.
Is there anything specific on what Nick covered? Otherwise, you're happy to wait for Pat to speak? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, yes, it was interesting, this headline about paying, that our cost had tripled and we were paying 3 times as much. And yes, our reactive maintenance costs for water supply have tripled over, I think, a 5-year period. But it's interesting that our reactive maintenance costs for wastewater and wastewater have gone up slightly, and stormwater has stayed fairly static. So if it was the unit rates of our contractor or inefficiencies of our contractor, you'd expect it to be applying across all 3, but it's only applying to water. And so what you're seeing is network fault runaway, that we're trying to keep older pipes operating, and older pipes don't like being dug up. Too much vibration and they crack. It's hard to find somewhere to cut in a joint to, and so you have to track back further. And they're also prone to failing more often. So that's what we are seeing. So when those reports landed, they weren't a surprise to me. I mean, we commissioned them pretty soon after I started, but I had a fair idea what they were going to say, and we were working from day 2. I think I announced we were going to restructure, my day 2. And so by the time those reports landed, we had restructured the organisation into an orthodox model. I think I talked to you about how inefficient our structure was, how complicated it was. After we dropped the new structure, and 2 of my direct reports came to me and said those changes had given me back a day a week, which at that level is huge, to be able to just stop endless meetings. We still have to fight it every now and then. I'll see an invitation for 30 people to go to a half-day workshop and have to intervene and say, no, that's not how we do things. We have 3 or 4 people that make a decision. I don't need 30, thank you very much. But there is support for those changes. We've changed the culture from helplessness to people speaking up. And now my problem is I can't walk down the hallway without someone stopping me and coming up with a suggestion about more changes we could make. But to be honest, we're driving a lot of change. Our organisation is under pressure. The staff are feeling it. And we just have to be careful. We've got to keep maintaining networks at the same time as we try and get the organisation in better shape. We're also gearing up to introduce new IT systems, which is a big project that requires a lot of staff resource and some of our best staff. I mean, this is critical stuff for this organisation and hopefully the new future company. And also we've been spending a lot of work supporting the development of the Water Services Delivery Plan, which has to be to DIA by September, which we also see as an important priority for us. So there's a lot of pressure on the organisation. We've changed our consultant and contractor panel arrangements to achieve more competitive tension. When I arrived, I was getting a briefing on one job and I was told, well, what's the problem? Well, we've got the wrong consultant. What do you mean we've got the wrong consultant? Well, at the start of the year, we go to our contractors panel and our consulting panel, and they tell us who's going to do the job. And I said, well, that'll stop today, and it has. And things like that make a huge difference in terms of performance. And we are now, we've stopped allocating jobs to the panels, to the contractors panels. We're looking to put work out to tender, because one of the challenges we face is we don't have a good benchmark of what the market is in the Wellington region. As Nick has said, it's It's complex. I've seen data that shows that the cost of maintaining the water and maintaining and renewing the roading network in Wellington City is much more expensive than anywhere else in the country. And that's just geography. That's a lot of reclaimed land with concrete roads, a lot of bus routes with asphalted concrete and cement stabilised base course under them, a lot of narrow roads, a lot of retaining walls above and below the roads. All those things make it more expensive to maintain the road. It also makes it damned expensive when you want to dig up the road to fix a pipe. And our data tracking is not sophisticated enough to recognise that. So there's a lot of work we have to do. It was only as these reports were landing that someone kindly pointed out there's information on the Transport Agency's website where there's a national benchmarking from 2023 of every council in the country about their costs per kilometre of roading. We should have known that. We should have been sophisticated enough to have known that in our own data, but we're not. And of course, one of the reasons is we don't have any financial systems of our own or asset management systems of our own. We've restructured our operations and maintenance, the Alliance. We've taken some 35 staff back from within the Alliance, staff that work for Wellington Water, but it's a mixture of Fulton Hogan staff and our own. And so now they work and report directly for us. They're the ones who have the interaction with the customer, so it's our voice they're hearing now. They are the ones who program the work, and they are the ones who check the invoices. So all of a sudden we have much more control and understanding of what's happening with our maintenance teams. And it's made such a difference having those 35 people back on our side of the tent. We have introduced a full performance framework, KPIs, and that's making a difference. A combination of the extra money that all the councils have put in for reactive maintenance, plus what you always get results once you measure something and report it. Response times are tracking downwards. They've never been so good. So I think our maintenance contractor, Fulton Hogan, are doing a good job. But I have to say, all of this, our consulting panel, our contracting panel, and the Alliance, it's always been in our grasp to have controlled this. We just, as Nick said, the model was right for the first couple of years, but then there was, okay, we've got things going, we're growing, and now we need to start looking at, is this a sustainable way of doing business? And it wasn't. So now we're having to unpick those things very quickly. People say you're doing a great job driving change, but really I'm just unleashing the hounds. Every time we announce another change, people are delighted and accept that this might make their job more challenging and slow things down a bit, but they are very happy about it. Because most of the people that work there are well aware we're spending ratepayers' money. Every day we're spending ratepayers' money that you have had to send an invoice out for. We've restructured our finance team to get much and improve our financial control, dramatically improved our financial controls. So perhaps the last thing I just wanted to touch on was sometime after the main announcements of the reports we released, there was another flurry of attention on the outrageous amount of money we're spending inappropriately on our staff. And so we released a summary of all the contractors and consultants we use, and it added up to just over $460 million for the 12-month period. The invoices that attracted the media attention added up to $35,000. So it wasn't exactly a large proportion. And I just want to give you an example of some of them. There was a fuss made, why were we spending money at Dive and Ski Limited? Well, we spent $187 at Dive and Ski Limited. The staff who change chlorine drums around have to wear breathing apparatus when they do that need oxygen cylinders that we refill at Dive and Ski. We spent $9,000 at Bella Italia, and there was a suggestion that was an endless series of exotic morning teas, lunches, etc. They're a 5-minute walk from our office, and they have a really big meeting room. And so if our staff need to meet off-site, it's a really convenient place to go. And yes, we will order morning tea, but most of it is in the hire of the meeting room, and we thought it reflected very good value for money. And I could run through the rest of them and have very good explanations for them all, but it's just a symptom of the siege we are under at the moment. Be assured that we have a relentless focus at the moment on value for money. So I've talked at a slightly more in depth than Nick, but Charles Barker, our Chief Operating Officer, who's been in the role for 2 months, and still frantically trying to recruit 2 direct reports, so he's pretty much at the moment doing 3 jobs, can give you a little bit more detail on some of the actual costs.
Just one thing on that point. Your senior leadership, Pat, has been very significantly changed, hasn't it? What proportion of your direct reports are new or will be new once Charles recruits his?
Is it 4 out of 7 or 5 out of 7, I think? There's only two out of 7 remaining from Chief Executive down. So there has been a lot of change at that top level. As I said, we've restructured the organisation, but I know that at least 2 of the groups now need to restructure again to get themselves in a better shape to reflect the focus on value for money, and also the fact that we've still got probably too many consultants and contractors working for us, and we want to get them out, and we want to be able to recruit staff to replace them. That way we'll be paying less, and we'll also, at the end of the project, have the knowledge in our organisation. That's right. And not with a consulting firm. We're very keen on, we have lost the focus on being a smart purchaser and too reliant on consultants. And look, they do a good job for us, but there's core knowledge that needs to be sitting within our organisation.
Kia ora. I think I'm just here to go because I think it's very reasonable to expect some assurance about the current spend that we're doing, about the value for money that was achieved, and not only just giving you assurance that in the future we will secure that value for money. And currently, I guess it's immediately now, I have directed 100% of all things are to go out to open tender. At a certain threshold, when we get down lower, it's got to at least have a closed tender or 3 quotes. But the 98% of it is going out to open tender. My job is to secure knowledge of what the market price for our work is, and then in a stage way get permission from PAC to then return to utilising the panel. And it should be really clear that panel is not the panel that we remember of 3 big consortiums doing allocation. It's been different words for it, disaggregated or dismantled. It is now every contractor or consultant we have a direct relationship with. We don't, and we will go through closed tenders on that panel to ensure that we get the benefit of a panel, but also retain that competitive tension. But before I do that, I've got to go prove what the open market can get. And it's been really interesting watching some of the new players that in the past, because of the panel construct, haven't been able to access the region, coming in and putting tenders in. So that's a really good story, but we have a lot of work in flight. So what I did want to give you some assurance is that as I go look through things like the key CapEx projects, most of the large CapEx projects completed through our major projects team always went out to tender. So it's the smaller, which add up to a sizable when you add them all together. But I just want to give you some confidence that there was competitive tension built into those big major projects. Anywhere that we're in mid-flight and design, that when we get to that point of awarding it for the contractor, they are all going out. So anything that's in design is a clear watershed moment. And I've put tension on to make sure that even if we're in the design phase, is there any possibility to introduce commercial attention to the things in flight? But generally it's coming out that the key milestone is that point where you go from design to construction. Everything else, there is probably the trunk main outfall pipeline that was complete, but that was from the panel. So in this year, that was under the old construct. I think, so in the collage things, we've got a pretty good strong narrative that I could tell you. We were weaker, if I look backwards, it's in the kind of the renewal space, the things that were coming in around $1 million, $2 million. They would have fallen below the major projects, and they would have been subject to what Pat was talking about, going straight to the panel, allocations. But there was a check in there. It's the engineer's estimate. Everything had to be independently estimated so that we could check the price. If it was within 10%, then that was considered acceptable. So there was a check on all of the work. So did we get the best value? Probably not, but were we wholesalely exploited? No. So I can give that assurance. It's also assuring to me that that estimation manual that outlines how we do this, our Wellington Water estimation manual is actually also used by Watercare. They use our manual and our process, and also Healthy Waters Auckland, which is the part of Auckland Council that does stormwater, also use that process for those things. So I can't say we got the best price, but I can give some confidence that the process that we use is valid, was valid, and other people use our process. In regards to OPEX, I think we touched on that. AECOM consider the rates that the Alliance gets charged as reasonable, but that doesn't mean that we can't get quicker. That's probably the key thing. And I think it was really important to look at those response times. One of our big things is our response times when we're overwhelmed with the number of leaks and the network faults, then it becomes very, very difficult to start showing value for money on any of those things. But we are in a really strong place now coming into the next financial year to put the right healthy pressure into the Alliance to demand that they continually show that cost per leak or whatever the measure is coming down. Last year, when we had the huge backlog and we had the big investment, we were not in a strong place to get value for money. That was driven by the acute water shortage and the chance that the region could run out of water. That is a big surge of money like that is, we'll get a benefit out of it this year, but getting value for money when you have to go and find every single contractor you can possibly can and turn them to fix the leaks of the backlog that had built up over a number of years, that last year is not the year that you look for us demonstrating really good value for money per leak, because we had to find every single person and put them onto a leak. This year, though, very different. We should reap the benefit of that now and be really with the leaks are at sustainable levels. I mean, if I look at if I look at Hutt City, back in January 2024, we had 403, and now we're down to 79. And we've got actually nearly the same, for the first time across the region, we actually probably nearly got less public leaks than we have private leaks that we know about. So in this situation, you're still funding us adequately. You should really be expecting us to show and demonstrate that we are being really savvy this year and putting the correct pressure within the Alliance to drive that value for money. That's that. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think there was one bit of feedback I had been receiving is that if you look at the amount of reactive renewals that we've, how much we've spent and divided by the number of leaks, it looks really expensive and really, again, reactive renewals cover a very wide range of activities. Just to simply, one part of that is leaks, but there's obviously valves and other types and other faults that all of that money goes to. So we just have to be really careful. The other problem we do have, and I think Pat has touched on it, is our data is scattered amongst many systems that we don't necessarily own, and so it takes us a lot of time to go through and actually, we've read Australia a number of times, if I look back, of being too quick to put data out to answer the immediate question, only to find that there are some aspects of the data that aren't correct, and then trying to desperately, and then we get driven down into trying to get fidelity in a data that just doesn't exist. And so we have to be very careful about what data we put out and the level of confidence that we have in it. That's why the new systems that are coming are so crucial for preparing the new entity for success, so that that entity has the right data at their fingertips that can drive informed investment. So that's me. I'm happy to answer as best I can any operational questions.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that really good explanation, I think, of where things are at. Any questions from members? Councillor Briggs, then Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, gents, for the overview. So for value for money for our coming year, because today we are talking about our annual plan, what do we expect to see in kind of more delivered at a cheaper price? You know, what does it actually look like for our ratepayers in our city as well for the program we've got in front, for our OPEX and our CAPEX? Do we expect to see a saving, or do we expect to see more being delivered? What does that look like?
So, as we talked about, we are very focused on value for money, and things have slowed down a little bit now because we're putting everything out to tender. But once we do have a feeling for what the market rates are, then we'll start using the panel and speeding up more. So we think we will get more value for money, but things like your major investments like the Seaview treatment plant, that was always going to go to competitive bid at any rate, so there's nothing changed there. So we will be focusing on delivering the program of work that's in your annual plan, either for slightly less, or maybe we can do slightly more. We won't know until we get tenders in just what that looks like, but then there'll be discussion with your staff about what that could be. But be assured, you know, that, I mean, Hutt City's great. You're relaying more pipeline than anyone else. The more that you can put on the ground, the more it does to pull down operating costs. So there's reactive maintenance costs.
I think in the OPEX space too is that the report did highlight, the ACOM report, that the plan to reactive ratio of maintenance is completely out of whack. Like 80% going to reactive, nothing going to planned. It's a really dire situation. So what I'm aiming to do in the operational space, drive efficiency into that reactive and make sure that we can put as much back into and start correcting that balance. So there's a huge, an unending list of planned maintenance that has been deferred or needs to be done. So I'm very confident I can spend your OPEX. And what you should be doing is making sure that I'm doing that in a value for money way that drives down the amount of reactive spend and increases the planned spend.
And just on that timeline to go through the tendering process and then ramp up the CAPEX works later in the year, do you have a forecasted timeline for what it's going to take you and your team to kind of go through those new processes to then be able to speed up the work in the second half of the year?
So we are moving very quickly. For example, we found that our contract documents, the special conditions of contract, were far too tough. We were pushing far too much risk onto the contractors, and as a result, getting prices that were too high. And in 2 weeks, we had our special conditions of contract changed and out to the market, and we had run training courses for our staff on what the new conditions of contract were like. So we, when we find something, we're reacting quickly. So the intention is that for the remainder of this financial year, everything goes out to contract, and then come 1 July, we'll have a discussion about, do we have enough data now to start negotiating some prices, knowing what the full New Zealand market has set the price for this region. And then we can speed up again. That's for those, as I said, you know, the major jobs, we've always put those out through a competitive process at any rate. Could I just add one thing? You know, in terms of driving price down, economies of scale is a critical thing, and also continuity of work. So 2 years ago in the region we laid 24 kilometres of pipe. This year we're going to lay 12, and next year we're hoping to lay 8 renewals. So what that meant was that last year some contractors had to lay off a lot of their staff because there was no work for them. So when we do start to ramp up again, that'll be hard to get contractors to be convinced to do that work, and it'll only be if the new company is established and can publish a program of work, that all of a sudden you'll get contractors showing up with the right gear, the right thrust boring equipment, all those sorts of things, and recruiting the best staff to start doing the work. And then if I was doing it, I would say, let's relay 40 kilometres of pipe in that suburb this year. You know, pick one of the worst ones, and the contractor can set up in one place and blitz it, and then we don't go back to that suburb for another 50 years. That's when you get economies of scale. But one council, we did 600 metres this year. There's no economies of scale in 600 metres. So no matter how much we squeeze the thing at our end, our structure does make it hard to get the best for the region.
And I guess that's the warning as well around if you're tempted to defund capital, it's not just not spending in a year, it's the flow-on effects to a very constrained and under stress contracting industry who are laying people off. And it's not just a case of turning the tap back on again. It takes time to build that. And Pat talks about the fact that we're not going to have you do it better than I do, as good a day today in terms of our network condition and performance for another 15 years is the latest. And so every reduction in capital, every delay for the new water entity, it takes that time period out, and we're going to feel it. So we do have to. It might seem like you're swimming against a very a king tide, but actually we have to keep as much going as we can to give confidence to industry as well, so they can do the work for us in the future.
I think too the level of renewals that we need to be up at is about 120 kilometres. So when we are down to 5 to 8 in any given year, you imagine we're not picking the best, the easiest. It's the very hardest, the very worst, the ones that we really have to get a really good case for. They are the most expensive. So when you compare us to another entity, maybe that's relaying 100 and is doing a neighbourhood where it's just beautiful and straight through the berms, our 5 to 8 kilometres is 20 metres here, 10 there. It's all the nastiest, hardest stuff that there is no option but to do. So that's not a way to get value for money. It's good value for money for the nature of the work, but when you put it on a spreadsheet and start comparing us, that doesn't look good.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you for coming in. It's really reassuring to hear that the number of leaks that have been reduced over the past few months are outstanding. So thank you for that. I guess you partly already answered my question that you mentioned that Hutt City Council has the highest spend in the region. Is that a result of the amount of project work that we're undertaking, or does it have anything to do with those geographical problems that you mentioned?
No, I think it's about the attitude of the council, both in terms of projects but also renewal over a sustained period of time. The attitude here is we've got to invest in water, and I'm not blowing smoke up your pipe. Saying that, it's the truth.
Any other questions? Just go, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Salinger.
Yes, gentlemen, thank you for being so frank with us. And I do find the last couple of times you've appeared before us quite reassuring that change is happening. There is still a lot of talk out, though, in the community, sort of we've been overcharged for years kind of thing. Can we chase that money? We're going to get some payback. Where's the Commerce Commission with their investigation? Now that you are going out to open market and getting a better idea of where benchmarking is, is there any basis for, and I've heard you say you could waste a whole lot of time going back and trying to, look at past deals, but is there any basis for money to be paid back by companies, or should we just get over it and move on?
I think I'll be cut to the point, no. The hysteria around charging, if you think about, if that were true, 3 times as much for everything, we'd be very concerned. But the truth is that companies charged amounts in a market that was set by Wellington Water, and all we can do is focus on making those markets more competitive, improving the internal oversight of projects and project delivery and contractual arrangements within Wellington Water. It's very difficult, Councillor Roberts, to actually define where that might have been specifically. I think there are some individual project examples, but I would say to you that when you actually look at, a higher cost of reactive maintenance by Wellington Water does not mean that we've been charged more. There are particular circumstances. Now, some of the contractual arrangements we've changed to be able to demonstrate that we are getting, we need to actually transparently demonstrate that we can get we are getting the best deal possible. But given the new entity and the work that's required to put in place the systems that will partly give us this oversight, that's the area that we should be focusing on. And I think it is about having that discussion with concerned residents, and I appreciate the positions that you're in. And actually, you can't stop about saying, look into the future. I don't think that's a good enough, but actually, let's really unpick what we're talking about. Wellington Water was an immature organisation that set up relationships that maybe didn't drive the best value for money. We're changing that. The cost of examining point by point is one that I'm prepared to say to you is not worth any of our whiles. And that's not because I'm concerned about what went on, or it's actually like we've got a short amount of time and a limited amount of resources. We know the networks are in dire straits and that it's going to take many years to get to a point where we feel comfortable. That's what we need to be focused on. It's pragmatic.
If I could just add to that. So all these payments were made in terms of contracts that we signed with these companies. I've been involved with contract debates where you're arguing that you've done something outside the terms of the contract, and how blindingly expensive that argument can be, and how little money you get back. But this time we're going into where we agree that they fulfill the terms of the contract. No, there'll be no chance of us getting it back. We'd just be sending good money after bad. And look, we really don't think it's as bad as it has been made out. As we've talked about, the big projects, which is where a lot of your money is fine. It's those small, that medium-sized area that we've talked about, and done to change our processes is the best way we can start returning value for the councils.
Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Stellinger, Councillor Parkin.
Thank you. A couple of you have mentioned today this narrative that came out about how we were paying times as much as anyone else, and how that's not true. And I think you've done a really good job of explaining that to us at this meeting and previous ones, to us in the room and a handful of people who might be watching online. Nevertheless, that myth prevails, and I think, to co-opt a phrase, maybe victims of network misinformation run away. And it's certainly not unique to this circumstance, and not unique to this company. We hear the same things repeatedly now about government decisions and people not understanding what they mean. So I wonder about what more we should do to help the general public understand. One concern I have is that people think, now that we've identified this, that we're paying so much more than other people, that we'll be paying less in the future, whereas we know under reform, actually, people will be paying more in future because more will be done. How collectively we can get a message out to our ratepayers that A continues to clarify why we're spending 3 times other councils for geographical reasons and others, and perhaps more importantly, that people shouldn't expect the amount they're paying for water services to go down in future. In fact, they should expect the opposite. So I just wonder what you think we could do collectively as councils, as shareholders of Wellington Water, and Wellington Water as an entity to those simple messages out, so people don't think there's a magic bullet coming, or that you know, if they elect a different council, that the outcome will be different in the future.
And we're organisation, we're certainly happy to awhi the kōrero of the councils around water reform. I think what we can do to feed into that is to talk about value for money, and not just talk about it, demonstrate it to you, and expect that you're going to have those critical questions for us. I know that Hutt City and 1 or 2 other councils have seen rate increases in recent years based on specific investment in 3 water infrastructure. That's something that you've already had a discussion with your community, and the community has agreed that it's important. Water reform and additional investment are a continuation of that. And yeah, I mean, you're right, it's going to cost more, and that comes down to the other kind of value, the values that we've got as communities, as neighbourhoods, as catchments. And my sense is that, once again, this community, these communities in the Hutt understand that. So I think it's the value for money, and then the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. And so Wellington Water will always reinforce that where you, as the appropriate leaders of that discussion, take it.
Could I just add, we try. We try and get the message out there. When those reports landed, I think Nick probably spent the first week being interviewed and explaining, no, this wasn't the story. And then I stepped up a bit in the second week trying the same thing. But once that first headline's out there, that's the damage done. And look, we let that reporter know very quickly that those numbers were wrong, but still that story carried on for another day or 2. It's very hard to get positive news stories out of any description. Sorry.
Thank you. And my other question is about the pipeline you spoke about, Pat, giving assurance to those companies that there is a pipeline, a steady one that they can bring back their employees. And another concern I have is about the change to new water service entities. That around the country, new water service entities will exist that have a restraint taken off them, which is the political decision-making about funding. And I remember even when our council in our previous long-term plan said, let's ramp all this up, and it was you guys who told us, no, we can't do that, we have to kind of do that. So in the short term, I guess it is, when these new water service entities come into play, is there a concern that there will actually be too much demand for the industry to ramp up quickly and do the work that's requested of them?
So I was involved with some work with the DIA and the previous round of water reforms with and their modelling suggested that over the next 10, 20 years, there probably needed to be another 4,000 people in the water industry, and that's contractors, consultants, and water company staff as well. So yes, there will be a challenge, I think, as the industry gears up to recruit those people or bring them in from overseas. One of the advantages I think the Wellington region has is I understand the councils still have to vote on this over the next month, but there's been an awful lot of work done by this region to get to the point they are, so that you should be one of the first on the ground, and that gives an advantage in terms of being the first to market as well. And because some of those other councils still have a lot of work to do to get an organisation stood up.
And also, Pat has worked on the advice that's come from Wellington Water, and Pat, you've articulated it previously, is that we look at about a sort of a 30% growth in work to market per annum. That would be a fair over time.
This so there has been some work done for the Water Services Drinking Plan. And so for the first couple of years, the proposal is to keep the number at around about 250 to 300 million, because there's several things you need. I'm just trying to remember. So you need as I talked about, that guaranteed workflow. And then you need to make sure that the contractors and consultants are gearing up to deliver it. But the most critical thing is you need an organisation that's resourced and capable of delivering that growth. And while my focus at the moment is turning this organisation around as quickly as possible, so it's not an impediment to the establishment of Metro Water, whatever it's going to be called, I think there's still a lot to be done before it's in a state that it can start to ramp up. And I think the modelling allows for about 22% per annum from about year 2 onwards. So that's the plan. But I still think that will see the Wellington region as one of the best served. Let's face it, this will then, if the answer is yes, it'll be the second biggest water supply company in New Zealand, and we'll have leverage from that point of view alone.
Gives it a level of scale. Yeah.
Councillor Stallinger.
Sorry. How's that? Thank you. Thanks very much, and thanks for the presentations. As in recent times, we've received a lot of very open information, and it really helps our understanding of what's going on. I've got 2 questions, if I may, Chair. First is mentioned with the changing and tendering processes, you've had some new, perhaps smaller companies tendering now, which weren't tendering before. I'm just interested in the results of those. Have you noticed any changes in pricing that you can, any trends which you can see as a result of the changes to date?
The main ones that I know of are still coming in through the tender process. So I would expect to be able to come in back and give you a good feedback on that, but at the moment I wouldn't have any data like that on hand. But I guess in conjunction with that, a number of different consultants and contractors and companies have been approaching us and have been having meetings, inquiring about how to join the panel, how to how we advertise our tenders. And all of those are going out on Get. So everything is fully open. So our aim is, my job is in the next couple of months to come back and report exactly on the question that you're answering to my chief executive, to say, this is what we've found, this is what we know. Should we keep doing this for another few more months with these projects which are coming up, or are we happy to start putting a percentage back through a more closed tender? But we really need to make sure that it's a really unique opportunity, just as Pat was saying, heading into the thing, to attract, my view, the more people, the more companies that are interested in having a footprint in Wellington and securing them into the region, it can only be a good thing. And there's great opportunities, but I'd like to see going forward too, allowing large packets of work to be broken into some smaller ones to allow small companies to grow. That's been difficult for them in the region too, and I think if you want to have sustainable growth, you need to make sure that you're doing smart tendering to secure your long-term future, just not securing the cheapest possible price for that one thing. You need to make sure that small companies have a chance to grow and prosper and grow into medium-sized companies, which produce some nice commercial tenders.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Second question is really for my understanding, and it's around the value for money and the costs we've been paying over time and so on. And I certainly appreciate the misinformation which was circulated in the media and gained a lot of traction, and I agree that was barking up the wrong tree, so to speak, and wasn't helpful. The one thing that really sticks in my mind is the fact that we had our asset revaluation, appointed our valuers. As I understand it, that whole process is audited by the Valuer General or somebody, I think. And the result of that that process, our values did increase by close to 3 times on our balance sheet. Now, there's a few other factors at play. As usual, we find a few assets we didn't know we had and so on, but the bulk of that was due to us paying higher unit rates for renewals. So that's still a question that I can't see how we can really, that we have an answer for that increase over a very short space of time between valuations, that's other than the fact that there was a large increase in the, a trebling, I suppose it must be, in the costs we were paying for a kilometre of pipe compared to the past. So I'm just wondering if there is a explanation as to why that may have happened when other councils didn't have similar value extensive increases. I picked up a snippet perhaps in that we were doing such small pieces of renewals, and maybe we weren't doing it that way in the past, and hence we've had a sudden increase. But other than that, I can't really see a justification. So I comment on that, but I will just finish by saying I'm very pleased with the work and the changes that are being made, and have a lot of confidence going forward that we will be getting significant improved value for money. But I'm still left with not really a justification for that big extent, other than we were just paying far too much.
So we weren't involved with that revaluation process. That was a direct relationship between the councils and the valuers. But one of the charts that we reported back on showed our relay rates versus what your revaluation rate was, and your revaluation rates were not based on our relay rates. I think they must, and I don't know how they did it, but they've got numbers that more reflect other major metropolitan areas. So that's, I think, the chart I'm looking at shows, which was, I think, one of the reports that we published. So I think it reflected some of our costs, but it didn't reflect all the costs that we have been paying for work.
Maybe I can just add some more information here. So we have had conversations at the Audit and Risk Committee about the asset revaluation process that took place and landed in June last year. There was a big jump up in values, and there was a number of factors involved in that. I suppose the important piece in that puzzle was that we did engage a valuer that did a much more comprehensive piece of work, and they did a lot more validation of those assets. So Councillor Stellinger, as you said, there's more assets, better asset data underlying there. Wellington Water, Pat, you wouldn't be aware, but Wellington Water did help us with the data that flowed into that valuation. We've very much depended on asset data from Wellington Water, and they also helped provide the valuers with all the contract rates that underpin that valuation. So there was a lot of information that did flow from Wellington Water, and it was as at a point in time. So the most recent contracts that had been, costs that had been incurred at that point in time. So, it was a real expert piece of advice that we did. We did it in conjunction with Wellington City Council and Upper Hutt City Council to really reset the quality of that asset valuation at that point in time. Yes, I suppose, we can pick this up probably further at the Audit and Risk Subcommittee process. I just want to remind you also that through the annual plan process, whilst there was a flow-on impact to depreciation, councils agreed not to adjust any of the rates revenue requirements off the back of that higher depreciation from that valuation. So we've basically parked it and kept the revenue levels the same as what was in the LTP. And so with the new entity set up, we expect that there'll be another valuation process at 30 June 2026, and we'll see the flow-on impacts to values, off the back of procurement activity that's happening now. So, the values are what they are through that valuation processes. Yes, they were audited and there was a lengthy, long audit process across that to validate those numbers. There's lots of complexity in working through those values and adding all the various components to the cost of those assets. So, I suppose that's kind of a summary of where we're at and some of the complexity. And we'll be going through, further work for this year-end annual report. We've got WSP doing a fair value assessment for us again, just to check that those values, whether they are landing in line with, if there's any updates or changes. So that's work's happening. So you'll get an update through the Audit and Risk Subcommittee on that piece of work as well. But just to reassure you that from an annual plan perspective, we haven't booked that change in depreciation and the flow and impacts to the asset revaluation as such. Thank you.
And sorry, I should have used my words better. So when I was well aware that we had provided information to the valuers, and was also aware that there was concern about the numbers. And so at that stage, we were commissioning these reports, and I was also aware of what some of the unit rates were looking like. So we were not advocating that our rates should be the basis of those valuations. And I think that where you've ended up is a fair and reasonable compromise. I do, and sets a target that we should be trying to get ourselves down to. But as I said, that won't happen until we get some more economies of scale. But it is interesting when you look at costs per lane kilometre of road network costs. The big metropolitans are more expensive in terms of roading than most of virtually every other council in the country. So putting water mains in the ground in those roads is also going to be more expensive as well. So that there is never going to be a point of comparing yourselves with most of New Zealand. The ones that you should be benchmarking against is probably more like Palmerston North, Christchurch, those sorts of areas. And some of the data I've seen would suggest that our valuation rates are very much in line with your valuation rates are very much in line with what they've got.
Okay, we have gotten to an hour, so we've got Councillor Parkin, and then if there's any final questions, Councillor Parkin.
I'm nice and easy because actually Councillor Stallinger's first question summarised what I was going to ask, and I was thinking slightly longer term in terms of using a year-by-year data based on the comparative analysis of whether or not we get what our value for money or relative spend per leak from the last 2 years is compared to the current situation, but obviously you don't have that data yet. Look forward to hearing that report when it comes.
Any final questions? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, gentlemen. Very, honest in bringing forward everything that's happened in the company and explaining it to us so well. You mentioned the onion being peeled back. Have we reached the middle yet?
God, I hope so. It won't be for want of trying. Look, we're on hyper alert, constantly evaluating the situation we find ourselves in. But actually, as you'll know, in this situation, you've got to prioritise. And so, if you look at the report recommendations that went to the Water Committee last week, out of all the reports into Wellington Water, 123 recommendations, and we've said the biggest chunk is the ones that we've either dealt with or are dealing with, and then there's ones that we're going to get to, and then there's ones that the new entity has to deal with. And so I think, given if you think about the expanse of those various reports, we've covered most of the business. I'd love to be able to say it's all over and there's nothing else, but look, there will be. You'll read articles that say Wellington Water spent $187 at a dive shop. Look, we're just in that zone, and that's fine. But to go back, you want to know that we're better, that we're improving. And that we can demonstrate value and efficiency to you, and that what we hand over to the new water company is as good as it possibly can be, so that company can function as well as it possibly can from day one.
Thank you, gentlemen. Well, I'll ask the final question. So as has been alluded to by a number of members, and as you'll know, we are obviously signing off most of our annual plan today, with the rubber stamp coming a little bit later this month. Can members around the table have confidence that the spend which is in here and what we are rating our ratepayers for when it comes to our water infrastructure investment, we can have confidence for the next 12 months that spend will be, in the best, will be done in the best possible way, and then we'll have those reassurances that that we can pass on to our community when they ask us and they raise things like Councillor Mitchell said that, oh, hold on, what's going on around this? You're paying 3 times more, etc., etc.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Very good. Really appreciate it. Okay. Yep, we'll just take a moment. Okay, we'll just do conflict of interest declarations. Is there any conflicts to declare from members? No? Okay. Moving through to recommendations to council, and what we will do is deal with the paid parking options report first, which is on page 326 of the agenda. So I'd ask Paul Hewitt, John Kingsbury to come forward to present on this item. And then we'll open up for any questions.
Kia ora, councillors. So just in relation to the paid parking rate options, so we were asked after the previous annual plan meeting to go away and look at the impacts of options if council decided not to increase paid parking by 50 cents per hour or implemented first hour free. So we've gone away and done that and set out the impacts of those options and what would be required to offset the loss of revenue should you decide to take either option. So the revenue is built into the rates calculations, so there are trade-offs. These are outlined in the paper, so we're happy to answer any questions councillors may have.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. Thank you for the report. This and lots of detail on what the effects are on council. What I didn't see and what I asked through the elected members' requests was what are the projected impacts of the changes in parking rates on businesses, and based on our prior knowledge and prior experience with having done paid free parking trials and the changes that we've already made. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Mayor, through the Chair. With respect to the impact on businesses, we don't have any current information on the direct correlation between the impact of paid parking on businesses. In the time we've got, we haven't had recent studies haven't been undertaken, but the feedback that we'd seen in the report that was done in, I believe there was 2016, there was a free parking trial undertaken by Hutt City Council. The summary there indicated that there was no measurable impact on transactions through businesses. It did go into a bit more detail around the impact on businesses that had their own parking facilities versus those that were solely reliant on high street traffic. I believe there was a small loss, we're talking maybe 1% or so, with respect to trade on the sort of Queen Street type shops. Versus those that had their own car park, which didn't have a noticeable impact.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so we've got the report in front of us. I think Councillor Edwards, you were looking to make a proposal?
Yeah, I have got some motions to move. I don't know whether they can be called up or I can read them out. Give you a chance to read those, and if I could get a second, I'll explain the rationale behind them.
Okay, so the key rec here is number 3, which would be retaining $3 across the city, and the daily rate charge being increased rather than $10 to $12, including Petone. Do I have a seconder for that? Oh, look, okay, yep, Councillor Stallinger. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, just so we can get the discussion going. So the rationale is this. I started off on the basis that I think there should be parity between Petone and Lower Hutt, because the retailers there and the businesses there, in my opinion, face similar challenges. And the ones in Lower Hutt are going to face some very significant challenges coming up once Riverlink construction gets underway. At the same time, it seems a bit unfortunate to me that we're going to hit Petone people in particular with another 17% increase in the hourly charge after, less than a year ago bringing in meters down there. And we've all heard from the businesses that they're finding it tough. And I agree with Kaz and the Petone Community Board and what she said this morning, that we simply don't have the data sets yet to draw any firm conclusions about how much the parking charges or parking in Petone is responsible for, those businesses feeling really hard hit. At the same time, I do believe in the principle of car drivers helping to pay for our roading costs, renewal and maintenance costs, rather than it all falling on ratepayers. So that's where I landed at what I thought might be a bit of a compromise, that we keep the hourly charge to what it is. We slightly raise the maximum daily charge to $12, which is well short of anything you'll be able to find in our neighbouring city. But it'll bring in a little bit of extra revenue to help offset the shortfall in revenue that we're facing. The recommendations, I guess, come with a clear warning that we might have to revisit these. The officers have told me that they can, continue to collect data on the impacts of parking in Petone, continue to look at transport costs and where savings might be able to be made. I don't want us to go down the path of cutting back on, maintenance and renewal of roading network. We've been down that path with water. We don't want to do it with roading. I think this lands us in a place. It's a compromise that might have to be revisited later in the year.
Councillor, questions? Yep. Yes.
Sorry, it is just a question of process, I guess, in particular regard to the last recommendation, which was that officers may need to bring decisions back to the subcommittee during the financial year. And I just wonder what nature of decisions this subcommittee can make during a financial year. Presumably we can't hike a parking fee halfway through a year that has to wait till the next annual plan process. So when we talk about further decisions, are they the decisions in here about making service level cuts or capital cuts, or quite what the nature of those decisions would be? Am I correct in assuming we can't change the parking fees halfway through a financial year?
I think it should be reported back to council and through the appropriate committee. And if there is ultimately a budget shortfall, then council will have the options of how to deal to that. But I don't think we'd be looking to increase fees in the middle of a year.
That wouldn't be an option.
We'd have to be offsetting it against other budgets and the likes. Yeah. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Happy to have any clarifying questions. For some members, they may not have seen those. Can we just leave those recs up? Yeah. Anything else? No? Okay, I'll go to Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. Just with that increase for the daily rate, do we know have we got an idea of the balance of how much money it would bring in to counter the shortfall?
The details are in the report, and that's the point we're making. It's not enough, but it's less than it otherwise would have been at the lower rate, and that's why we need to keep an eye on it, accepting that we don't have a full data set yet.
I think, I think it should be reported back to council and through the appropriate committee. And if there is ultimately a budget shortfall, then council will have the options of how to deal to that. Okay, Councillor Salinger, you had your hand up.
No, not for a question, but
Yeah, for a comment. Yeah, happy to go back to comments now. If there's no other questions. Yep.
yes. So grateful for Councillor Edwards for bringing forward this. I wasn't anticipating it, but seeing it there, I thought it was something I could support. I think the data we've got is actually quite good and quite helpful. I know it's missing something, it's not quite complete. What I was left concluding was that it's very uneven, the impact of this on businesses, because we certainly heard from some, and I do believe them, that they have been significantly impacted. I suspect there's some others that may have actually done better as a result of these, just because a quicker turnover of customers. It just feels to me like it's a tough time at the moment for those businesses who have hurt because of this change to put another bit extra on, and I think it's a good compromise.
Any other comments? Councillor Morgan?
Yeah, I agree. I actually went down Jackson Street and went down one of the streets, and it was probably a 60-40 split about how people were feeling, and so there's real okay. Yeah, there's obviously a lot of people still hurting from that, but this is a nice compromise, I think, given my goodness, sorry. Sorry. Given, this is a nice segue, I think, till we do get a little bit more data, but just to help people with the current times. And I think it's just a timing issue as well. With, last year, the big changes, and now this, it feels like another hit for them, I feel. So with consistency across the city, I think this could be a nice way forward, although I know it doesn't meet all of our needs for revenue. So thank you.
Councillor Briggs?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Edwards, for putting this forward. As I've said in previous meetings over the years, having gradual increases over time is more of an appropriate way to handle things rather than large jumps. We know from previous years we're actually lagging a bit in this area of having an appropriate fee for the privilege of parking across our city. And so I hear the compromise. I think for me, it still doesn't kind of meet the mark of keeping up with the cost of delivering expected road maintenance and renewals that our drivers expect across our city. I know for this council, for decades, there's been underinvestment on our substandard roads and other parts of the network that we actually haven't had the revenue or the rate space prioritised towards that work. And so for me, it's kind of a bit of a tension around that. I do note the public comment that we had at our previous meeting. I think for some of our businesses, particularly those that have got discretionary items in their business as their primary sale point, they will be feeling it harder at the moment, and that's much more down to the economic times that we're facing in our city, but also across the country. And I think less to do about the parking. As done in previous terms, as responded to by Councillor Parkin's question, this research project that we did in partnership with the CBD businesses in good faith showed little to no return for them collectively. There may be individual winners and losers in different businesses for sure, but the data I think still sits the same, that we need to make sure that there's actually parking available for those that want to purchase and spend their time in Petone and in the CBD. And if those parks are full, well then those that would want to purchase can't. There is no good time to increase costs or fees, and there's no time, I think, when our community will come in here on vast numbers telling us, please increase the parking costs. However, we get the opposite of, can you please maintain our network? Can you please increase the network's capability and capacity? And so those two things need to be held in tension. So for me, I'll listen to the rest of the debate, but I'm much more inclined to have the initial planned increase due to the fact that in future years and future councils would be forced to do a bigger jump, which is far less palatable to our community.
Any other comment? Councillor Tupou and Councillor Dyer.
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor. Just thank you to the officers for sending us all the data the other week and seeing the decline across the region and spending. So it is about striking the balance of investment of visitors coming in and enjoying what Petone has to offer, and contributing towards, you know, the much needed infrastructure in Pitoni. But I think it's also supporting our businesses and our Hutt residents as well to enjoy the assets that we have there, Mr Mayor. So I agree with Councillor Edwards' amendment that he's put forward. Kia ora.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the motion? Okay, actually, if there's no one speaking against, we're just going to put it to the vote now. So all those in favour say aye. Those against, no. Declare that carried. Okay, moving through. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to go through to the item 5A, which is the final decisions on the annual plan. Jenny, do you want to make any comments?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just some brief comments. We obviously went through a lot of detailed work at the last meeting on the 16th of May, and you progressed a whole range of decisions. Those have been incorporated into the annual plan information in front of you today. So just to summarise off the back of that decision on the parking, where we would be landing with the rates increase. So through all the decisions you've made, the LTP had a rates increase of 13.4%. And we're now at 12.6%, and it wouldn't be amended. There'd be no change to that off the back of that parking decision. So that's a key aspect. So these decisions basically in front of you now are to finalise the annual plan, confirm the rates increase, confirm the fees and charges, confirm the development contributions policy. That's off the back of those decisions you made at the last meeting. And there's a range of noting recs. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? No, I think we can move straight through to the recommendations then. So just give me a moment. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll pull up the recommendations on the screen just with a few edits. Okay, so just obviously basic edits there. If we scroll down, anything further down. Yep. So it's all pretty straightforward. And obviously we've made the decision on the parking aspect. So they are basically as outlined in the papers before you with those changes. Now, obviously, before we go through this, is there anything else? Speak now or forever hold your peace. No, good. Excellent. Means we've covered everything. Okay, so how would we like to take the recommendations? Do we want to take them as a... Would anyone like to separate any of the recommendations out? Or take them as a whole? As a whole? Okay. So I'll move recommendations... sorry, how many have we got there? So 17. So 1 through to 17. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs. Any discussion? We've got Councillor Dyer, because I know you're a little bit conscious on time, and then Councillor Stallinger.
Good, thank you. I'll be voting against the 12.6 rate increase again, because right now double-digit increases still remain out of touch for many of our households and businesses. And the main rationale for why I'm voting against it is that we're currently only funding about 40% of our Three Waters depreciation. And I've absolutely been on board with our deliberate shift to increase depreciation across our assets. However, there's some pretty good reasons why right now we could reduce this by a fraction, which would ease up $3.8 million of operational costs. And that one adjustment alone would drop us down to a single-digit increase. I do want to make it clear, though, I'm not saying there should be no increase. I know it's an absolute recipe for disaster. I'm simply just saying that right now our communities are struggling, and I'm hearing it in every conversation I'm having right now. And I believe that with water assets almost certainly leaving our books in the next 12 months, have an opportunity to reduce the increase a little bit to get it down to a single digit. Plenty of other councils around New Zealand are doing this. Audit New Zealand has provided an unmodified opinion for the councils that are deliberately choosing to cut funding and depreciation, given the circumstances we're all in with local water done well. There are some councils that are funding no depreciation at all, and I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting a $3.8 million reduction in that space. So residents have asked us to find further savings, and unless we adopt this adjustment and bring the rise to a single digit, I'll be voting against today's plan and the.
Councillor Stallinger.
Is this one working now? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. So I indicated at our last meeting that I was likely to vote against the plan, and that at this meeting, rather than the last one, I would outline my reasons for that, particularly because some councils thought that anyone taking that step should explain their rationale for it, and I thought that was a fair request. I've touched on some of these things before, or most of them, but I'll again explain that so it's on the record, and hopefully that satisfies the concerns of some councillors around the table. Overall, I've really just lost full confidence in our ability to control costs, and it's not something I say lightly. It's pretty clear our financial position has been devastated in recent years. Our rates charges have doubled and are set to double again. Our financial strategy to keep rates affordable has failed. Our debt has increased by nearly 400 million in recent years and continues to accelerate until it virtually maxes out. Our credit rating has been cut, increasing our interest costs. We expect a deficit at my last look of 33 million this year. I believe that's the largest in our history. Our backlog of infrastructure works has grown exponentially, and what was in today's terms, a modest amount of investment backlog of just over $100 million for pipes, which was readily affordable with our debt limits. We now have a backlog closer to 400 million just for pipes, and new large backlogs for growth-related infrastructure and at our treatment plant. It's hard to imagine things could be much worse. I guess the saving grace is we can hand over and give a bit of a hospital pass to this new water entity, and we'll be on a better footing then. Certainly there's a lot of factors beyond our control, but I still believe we could have done better. And some examples I raised in 2023, concerns about the 50% increase in our overheads and other corporate services costs, which added about 100 million to our budgets over 10 years and had the effect of adding about 8% to everyone's rates. Interestingly, this new spending could have almost funded the pipe backlog we had at that time. I was alarmed when elected members told me they were unaware this had happened, and officers confirmed to me that there was no business case for it and no report was provided to council explaining it. So to me, that showed there was a fundamental weakness in our oversight of expenditure, and I'm not aware we've done much to address that since. In 23-24, our LTP year, we had assurance that a line-by-line review was undertaken of all expenditure to identify savings. But given our spending increases were still above local government inflation in significant areas, I asked what procedures were undertaken for this line-by-line review. This was my endeavour to gain confidence in our control of spending. I was refused an answer to this question, despite repeated attempts to get an answer, something I've never experienced at a governance table before. Enabling a valid question, I believe, from a councillor on a question such as this embedded a fundamental weakness in governance oversight of our deteriorating finances. And thirdly, we've had the confirmation from Wellington Water that we received a poor value for money for a large portion of our capital expenditure. While we clearly should have been able to trust that this would not be the case, it doesn't excuse our own lack of attention to our rising costs. Simple procedures such as high-level comparisons of costs over time would have taken little time to do and could have highlighted some serious concerns at least a year or two back. So our review of expenditure line by line in the past must have admitted to undertake a close look at our water costs, which was our biggest item of expenditure. So I've concluded that I've got serious concerns about our ability to critically challenge ourselves and ask the uncomfortable questions in areas such as these. All the while we've continued to grow a larger and more expensive organisation. So ratepayers are paying a heavy price for this, and I don't believe I can continue to support a plan in these circumstances.
Any other comment? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just a quick comment in response, really. I wasn't planning to make any comment, but I think Councillor Stellinger's opening comments did well to sum up the conundrum of my time on this council. One, that we're increasing our debt levels to record levels in order to invest in our water infrastructure, and two, that the backlog is still increasing and we're still not actually spending enough in that field. And I think, Wellington Water have been at pains to explain to us that we weren't getting ripped off, that we were getting pretty good value for money, maybe not the best we could get, but pretty good value for money. So in terms of our water spending, in particular, I'm kind of confident that over the past few years, when this new council came in with a new mayor, we did attack that problem head on. We did decide collectively to do what we could. And I think we've been all of the understanding that it's still not enough. And Wellington Water have repeatedly told us it's not enough, that we should be doing more. We should be renewing 30 kilometres of pipes every year for 30 years to get back where we need to be. So in particular, in regards to the water spending, it is a massive amount of money we've been investing on behalf of our community. It's not enough. So we are playing that balancing game. We have been for the past few years. And I kind of feel a bit differently, I think, about whether money is well spent or not. The other option was not to spend it and for our pipes to continue to get worse and worse and end up in the same position as some of our neighbouring councils with massive failures, actually, as that network runs away. Kia ora.
Other comment from members? Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just firstly, in response to Councillor Dyer's comments, I think for me it's, all of us are constantly in connection with our community. We will constantly hear the challenges that our community is going through. And to hear that people are finding it financially challenging is not a unique experience. I think the suggestion that Councillor Dyer put forward is not good governance. To be recommending that we do not cater for depreciation is not wise. Yes, our intended course of travel is to be handing over our assets and our liabilities of our water infrastructure to a new entity. However, they're still ours. And until such a time they're not ours, they're ours to cater for, both financially and to actually have our depreciation accounted for. It's very arbitrary to be putting a line in the sand saying it needs to be a single digits rates increase to be acceptable. That does not sit well with me when we're putting a line in the sand and saying a dollar value or a rates increase value without actually having a considered financial approach and rationale behind it. To Councillor Stellinger's comments, thank you, Councillor, for articulating your experience over the last few years. Again, we've agreed to disagree again on a few points. I can understand your lack of trust. However, today, hearing from Wellington Water Chair and CE around what is happening and the reassurance that we have with our annual plan going forward, that value for money is front of mind for them and they're actively making changes this financial year. So come the start of the next, that we will be getting value for money. And with our current spend, either more will be done or we may be getting it at a better price. Either, to me, those are acceptable outcomes. As you've noted, there's significant work, particularly in the capital space, to take place. And actually, the biggest barrier to that happening is going to actually be the workforce and being work ready to actually take on the challenge that we have. So even if we could increase our capex by a greater sum, they wouldn't be able to respond to that in the next financial year. So for me, I think this plan strikes the right balance. It's taking all things into account, our community, our residents, our business owners, as well as kind of keep our long-term plan on course. If we are to pull back in any way, that has a significant impact for years to come, setting up the next council for failure, setting our community up for failure. And what we've seen and heard over the last 3, 6, 9 years is underinvestment in any aspect of our city has an intergenerational impact. And I'm not willing to be part of a council that doesn't continue the work that our city deserves.
Any other comment? Final, yep, Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage. And so, yes, the people are watching us. As someone who this year has just bought a new house in Wainuiomata, the greatest suburb, so it's in my own personal and financial interests to vote against this today. But I'm not going to do that. And the reason I'm not going to do that, sir, is because, and I can only speak for myself, this city needs leadership. So I won't be a cop-out. We worked up to this point, the officers have worked up to this point. We've done our due diligence, we've listened to the people, we've engaged. And as my colleague has mentioned, Councillor Briggs, we can't get to this point and then turn around. When we've had every opportunity at every stage to vote against every budget line up until this point if we wanted to oppose this plan, Mr. Mayor. So at this point, I think, just let us, what the city wants is leadership. They do not want the city to fall. I don't want the city to fall. That's the worst type of governance that the city could have. So I think it's pertinent for us. It's prudent for us as kaitiaki, as stewards of the city. We've been elected to keep moving this ship forward and not to sink it. That we go ahead with a strong plan. We've got the mandate. Let's move on ahead and get the city up and running. Kia ora.
Happy to make the final comment. So thank you, members, for that debate. And thank you for your efforts throughout this entire annual plan process, as it has been in previous years. I think the spirit that you've brought to this process has been outstanding. The professionalism that you've brought around the table has been fantastic, and a big thank you to the healthy challenge from both elected members to officers and officers back to elected members throughout as we navigate some of the biggest issues facing our city. What I would say is that I'm the first to acknowledge that when we look at the level of rate increases over the next 10 years and what has been in place, there is no question that sustainability, financial sustainability, is a problem. That is no different to nearly every council in this country. We are no different. There is a far bigger problem that exists that needs to be solved when it comes to how we fund services in our local communities, and we know that. So let's just not pretend like that's not happening. I think that's really important. What I would also say, though, is that we as a council have intentionally said our number one top priority is our investment in water infrastructure. That is what is driving the level of debt which we will hold. That is what is driving the level of rates increases that we have. So anyone who says they do not support that needs to be upfront with our ratepayers and say that they are also willing to slash that investment. We can tinker around the edges all we like. We can tinker around the edges of all the other things that we as a council do. But the only way to have a serious impact on lowering the debt levels and the rates increase is to slash that core infrastructure investment. Now, I think that with some of the concerns around Wellington Water, it has been raised by councillors over the last 6 months with the reports that have come back. There were some fair questions around that. But I think, again, we've been given the reassurance today, and we've seen the efforts that have gone on from Wellington Water to turn that ship around to get it in the best position possible. So I would have thought that that would give members the confidence to be able to still support this, because like I say, if you don't support the rates increase to the level it is, or the debt, you need to slash that basic infrastructure investment. That's the reality, and we need to be upfront with people when we go out there and we talk to them about that. The one other thing I just want to address is that I've been on this council since 2013, and never have we been in a better place for the information that governors receive to make decisions. I remember back in 2013, 2014, those years, where I basically didn't really know what was going on until about February or March. We engaged the governors from October to make sure you are across everything that is happening, that you have all opportunities to ask as many questions as you like. Now, there is a difference between receiving information that you don't like or disagree with versus not receiving information at all. There is a distinction there. And I think sometimes we just need to accept that while you may not agree with a pathway or where things are at, that doesn't mean that that people aren't working hard to provide you the best advice they possibly can. And I really want to push back strongly on that, because I know how important it is to our officials that they do their best to answer all of the questions that come through. But in some cases, they simply can't answer them, or they have answered them and they just might not answer them to the way you've liked it. So I just wanted to push against that. Finally, I just want to say that let's not forget what is happening in our city at the moment. It is a pretty exciting time to be in the Hutt. We have landed a $1.5 billion deal in Riverlink with the infrastructure investment that will go into that project. We are a trusted partner of successive governments, even when that government changes. We have built strong relationships. The approach that we have taken, particularly when it comes to the investment that we are making across our city, which, yes, has incurred, in some cases, more debt or higher levels of rates increase, has meant that we have been able to make the most of that by getting government funding into the city as well, and in the way that we've approached things. And I think there are a number of examples we can speak to recently in the last 6 months that point to that. So let's not forget that we're a growing city. More and more people want to come and live in our city. That creates challenges for us when it comes to growth infrastructure and the likes as well. But the Hutt is a pretty incredible place to be right now. And there is a whole heap of opportunity to come, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years if we do that better. What I tell you will not do us well is if we take a slash and burn approach, which has happened in previous times around this council in previous decades, to look to underinvest and to make those problems a problem for the next generation. I just want to say thank you for your work to ensure that we don't take that path. We look to do as the best we possibly can, while always looking at ourselves to see where we can do things in a better way. So on that note, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against, no.
By division, please.
No.
By division. Okay.
I'll call out the names for the recommendations or against. Mayor Campbell-Barry.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Lewis. Councillor Barrett. Councillor Briggs.
Aye.
Councillor Brown.
Aye.
Councillor Dyer.
Against.
Councillor Edwards.
Aye.
Councillor Mitchell.
Aye.
Councillor Morgan.
Aye.
Councillor Parkin.
Aye.
Councillor Shaw.
Aye.
Councillor Stallinger. Councillor Tupou.
Aye.
That motion is carried, Mr Mayor.
That is carried. Thank you, everyone. So moving through to item 7, which is questions. I've received no questions, so we'll move to closing karakia, but we will go straight into full council, so we'll leave that. So I declare the subcommittee meeting closed at 11:19 a.m. Moving straight through to the council meeting. Apologies, we've got a full house now, I believe, as well. Yep. Okay. And moving through to public comment. We've got 10 members of the public who wish to speak. No, just kidding. Had you there for a second. Conflict of interest declarations. None to declare. Okay, moving through to item 5, which is recommendations to council from the long-term plan annual plan committee meeting. This is items A and B, which is basically the recommendations we've just passed. Okay, so put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against, no. Seconded by Councillor Briggs. All those in favour say aye. Those against, no. No. Declare that carried. Okay. So moving through questions, received no questions. And just before we close, as I was saying, just to say thank you, everyone, for your efforts. Thank you, Joe and the team, Jenny in particular. Obviously, this is a process which will start again in probably a few weeks' time. No, it's already started. But, you know, I reflect on obviously what is coming down in the pipeline with water reform and what that looks like. And I think that for the next council, for whoever is around the table, there is obviously an opportunity for a little bit of a reset there, because it will look like a very different, you know, balance sheet. So I think that just want to say thank you for the incredible work that's gone on in advising us and to be able to prepare these plans for the council. So can we just give the team a round of applause? Cool. Okay, but we've still got to sign it off technically on later this month, so we'll save any more thanks until then. So we'll go through to our closing karakia. Unihia e te uru tapunui, kia wātia, kia mama, tēnā kau, te atina, te wairua e te rā takatu. Koea re rongo whakeere, aki kia runga, kia wātia, hai rā, kua wātia, hau pamaria. Thank you, everyone. I declare the meeting closed at 11:22 a.m.